It started with the sunset. That's the only way I can explain it. The only place that feels like a real beginning. I'd just moved into the apartment, a fourth floor walk-up with high ceilings and what the landlord called character, which meant old pipes and floors that groaned like a dying man. But it had a huge window in the living room that faced west. The first evening, with boxes piled up like monuments to a life I hadn't unpacked yet, I decided to do something creative, something to mark the moment. I grabbed my phone and a small, cheap tripod I used for holidays. I was going to make a time-lapse of the sunset bleeding over the city. I set it on the opposite windowsill, aimed it across the length of the empty living room. The frame captured the big window, the bare floorboards, and the corner where a sad-looking armchair sat, the only piece of furniture I'd unwrapped. I hit record, set the time-lapse function, and forgot about it. I ordered a pizza, ate it on the floor, and eventually crashed on a pile of blankets where my couch would eventually go. I was exhausted from the move. The city hummed outside, a lullaby of sirens and distant traffic I wasn't yet used to. I slept like the dead, which is a phrase I don't use lightly anymore. The next morning, my phone was almost dead, but the file was there. A 3-hour recording compressed into about 45 seconds. I made a cup of instant coffee, sat on the floor, and pressed play. It was beautiful at first. The golden light flooded the room, painting everything in warm tones. The shadows of the window panes stretched, long and thin, crawling across the floor like spider legs. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the room plunged into a gorgeous, deep blue twilight. The lights of the city began to sparkle. It was perfect. It was exactly what I'd wanted. I watched it again, a small smile on my face. This was a good move, a new start. On the third viewing, my brain, now caffeinated and more alert, caught something. A flicker, a smudge. I paused the video, scrubbing back and forth with my thumb. There, just as the last sliver of direct sunlight vanished, in the corner of the room, near the ceiling, a patch of shadow seemed to thicken. It was subtle, easily mistaken for a digital artifact or a trick of the changing light. I told myself it was a compression glitch. My phone wasn't a professional camera after all. But I couldn't shake it. I zoomed in, the pixels breaking apart into a mosaic of color. The smudge didn't look like a glitch. Glitches are geometric, blocky. This was soft, organic. It looked like a pool of ink spilled on dark water. I put the phone down, telling myself I was being stupid. It was a new, empty space. My mind was just playing tricks on me. I spent the day unpacking, trying to make the apartment feel like a home. I built my bed frame, set up my desk, hung a few pictures. Every time I glanced at the corner from the video, a little knot of unease tightened in my stomach. It was just a corner, just plaster and old paint, but I couldn't stop seeing that dark patch in my mind's eye. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The building's groans sounded less like settling and more like footsteps. A faint scratching from inside the walls could have been mice, but my imagination ran wild. I kept thinking about the video, about that smudge. I told myself it was an experiment, a way to prove myself wrong. I charged my phone, set it up on the tripod again, in the exact same spot. This time, I didn't use the time-lapse function. I just hit record, making sure the frame covered the same empty corner and the big window. I tried to stay awake, watching the room through the tiny screen of my phone from my position on the pile of blankets. It felt ridiculous, like a ghost hunter in a low-budget reality show. The room was silent, bathed in the orange glow of a street lamp outside. Nothing happened. My eyelids grew heavy. The hum of the city pulled me under. I woke with a jolt, unsure what had woken me. The room was cold, colder than before. I fumbled for my phone. It was still recording. The battery was draining fast. I stopped the video and saved it. My heart was pounding, a frantic, irrational rhythm. I felt like I wasn't alone. I didn't watch the new video right away. I was too afraid. I made more coffee, my hands trembling slightly. I told myself I was being an idiot, that I was just spooked by a new place. I forced myself to sit down, take a deep breath, and press play. The first hour was nothing, just the empty room, the orange light, the occasional flash of headlights from the street below. I fast-forwarded, my thumb skating across the timeline. Then I saw it. I stopped, rewound, and played it at normal speed. It started in the same corner. The shadow wasn't just a smudge anymore. It was darker, more defined. It poured down from the corner of the ceiling like black smoke, pooling on the floor. It was slow, deliberate. It didn't have a source. It wasn't a shadow cast by anything. It was the thing itself. My breath hitched. My coffee cups had forgotten, growing cold. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the amorphous shape began to move. It slithered out from the corner, staying close to the wall, a flat, two-dimensional stain on my reality. It was utterly silent. It moved across the floor, passing the spot where the armchair sat. For a moment, it seemed to climb the leg of the chair, wrapping around it like a vine before retreating back to the floor. It was exploring, or maybe it was hunting. The thought sent a shock of ice through my veins. The shadow crept across the bare floorboards, a moving void in the dim light. It headed directly for the center of the room, for the pile of blankets where I had been sleeping. It stopped right at the edge of the bedding. I saw it on the screen, a patch of absolute blackness hovering over the place where my head would have been. It just stayed there. It pulsed subtly, the edges seeming to breathe. It was watching me sleep. For how long, I couldn't tell. I fast-forwarded through the video. For over an hour it remained there, a silent, motionless sentinel over my unconscious body. My stomach churned. I felt violated on a level I couldn't articulate. Then, just as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside the window, it retreated. It didn't scurry away. It flowed back in a single fluid motion, retracting into the corner and up the wall, dissolving back into the normal, everyday shadows of the room as if it had never been there. I dropped the phone on the floor. I scrambled backwards, away from the pile of blankets, my back hitting the cold plaster of the opposite wall. I was breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't my imagination. There was something in my apartment, and my phone had recorded it, twice. I didn't know what to do. Who do you call? The police? Hello, officer. There's a spooky shadow in my living room. I've got it on video. They'd think I was high or having a psychotic break. My landlord. What could he do? Call a shadowy exterminator. I was completely and utterly alone with this knowledge. I spent the rest of the day in a state of high alert. I didn't unpack anymore. I just sat on a kitchen stool, watching the corner of the living room. In the bright daylight, it looked normal, innocuous, but I knew what lurked there, waiting for the sun to go down. I felt its presence like a low-frequency hum, a pressure against my eardrums. I thought about leaving, just packing up my few belongings and running, but where would I go? And what if it wasn't the apartment that was haunted? The shadow had hovered over me. What if it was attached to me? The thought was paralyzing. I had to know more. I had to understand what I was dealing with. That night, I became a hunter. I set up the phone again, but this time I also set up my laptop on the kitchen counter, streaming the phone's camera feed to the larger screen. I turned on every single light in the apartment, flooding the living room with harsh, sterile light. There would be no shadows for it to hide in. I sat there, my eyes glued to the screen, a heavy kitchen knife on the counter next to me. It felt theatrical and useless, but it was the only comfort I could find. For hours, nothing. The brightly lit room remained empty. The corner was just a corner. My adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a creeping exhaustion. Maybe the light was enough to keep it at bay. Then, around a.m., the lamp on my desk flickered, once, twice. Then it went out. A moment later, the main overhead light did the same, plunging the room into the familiar orange glow of the street lamp. A circuit breaker, I thought. A perfectly normal explanation, but my blood ran cold. I looked at the laptop screen. The corner was dark again, and from the darkness it began to emerge. It was faster this time, bolder. The light hadn't scared it. It had just been waiting. It poured into the room, larger than before, a sprawling, jagged stain. It wasn't just a patch of darkness anymore. It was taking a shape. As it moved into the center of the room, it began to rise from the floor. It was no longer two-dimensional. It was peeling itself off the floorboards, elongating, stretching upwards like a column of black smoke. It was tall, impossibly tall and thin, its head brushing the high ceiling. It had no features, no face, no limbs, but the shape was unmistakably humanoid, a grotesque parody of a man, drawn out and distorted. It stood in the middle of my living room, swaying slightly, as if in a breeze I couldn't feel. I couldn't breathe. My throat was clamped shut. My eyes were wide, darting from the horrifying figure on my laptop screen to the empty space in the living room where it was supposed to be. With a sickening lurch of my stomach, I realized I couldn't see it with my own eyes. The lights were out, but the ambient glow should have been enough to see something. There was nothing there, just an empty room. But on the screen, the live feed from my phone, it stood, a towering black silhouette. Why could the camera see it and I couldn't? Was it a different spectrum of light? Or was my mind protecting me, refusing to process the impossible thing standing just 20 feet away? The figure on the screen turned its head slowly. It had no eyes, but I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that it was looking directly at the phone on the windowsill. It knew it was being watched. It knew it was being recorded. Then it started to move, not toward me, toward the phone. It glided across the floor, its form wavering and unstable. It was a creature made of pure absence, a hole in the world. I was frozen, my hand hovering over the useless knife. My mind was screaming, a high-pitched keen of pure terror. On the screen, the shadow figure reached the windowsill. It raised a long, thin tendril of darkness, an appendage that hadn't been there a second before. It reached for the phone, and as its shadowy finger touched the lens on the video feed, my laptop screen went black. But the feed hadn't cut. I could still see the little red recording icon. The figure was blocking the lens. It was covering the camera's eye, and then I heard it. For the first time, I heard it with my own ears, not through a recording. It wasn't a voice. It was a sound like static, like a radio tuned between stations. But it was coming from inside my head. It was a dry, scraping whisper that felt like it was sanding down the inside of my skull. The sound formed a word, or something like a word. A name. My name. That broke the paralysis. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. I launched myself off the stool, grabbing my keys and my wallet from the counter. I didn't think about the knife or my laptop or any of my possessions. I just ran. I fumbled with the locks on my apartment door, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key. The static in my head grew louder, a chorus of whispering insects. I threw the door open and sprinted into the hallway, not daring to look back. I flew down the 4 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silent building. I burst out onto the street, the cold night air hitting my face like a physical blow. I didn't stop running. I ran for blocks, my lungs burning, the frantic rhythm of my own feet, the only sound I could hear besides the blood pounding in my ears. I finally collapsed against a wall in a brightly lit area several blocks away, gasping for air, my body trembling uncontrollably. I looked back in the direction of my apartment. It was just another building in a line of buildings, but I knew what was inside, or what had been. It was only then that I realized what I had grabbed in. My blind panic, my keys, my wallet, and my phone. I had run out of the apartment, but I had brought the camera with me. I had brought the evidence. I had brought its picture. I'm in a motel now, 2 towns over. I haven't slept. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that tall, thin shape. I hear that dry, static whisper in my head. I haven't gone back to the apartment. I'm not going back. I called the landlord from a payphone and told him I had a family emergency and had to break the lease. I still have the videos. They're on my phone, right here, next to me on this cheap cigarettes card nightstand. I've watched them over and over, trying to make sense of them, trying to prove to myself that I'm not insane. They are the only proof I have that this was real. The last video is the most terrifying. It's mostly black, from when the thing covered the lens. But I didn't stop the recording when I ran. The phone was in my hand, jostling around, capturing fragmented images of the hallway, the stairs, the street. Right at the end, just before the battery finally died, the phone must have twisted in my grip. For a single stable second, it was pointing back the way I had come. The video shows the open doorway of my apartment building, a dark maw in the night, and standing in the doorway, just visible in the gloom, is a tall, thin figure. It's not looking at me. It's looking directly at the phone, directly at the lens, as if to say, I see you, I know you have me, and the video cuts out. I can't delete them. I feel like if I do, I'll be deleting the only proof that I'm not crazy, but I'm terrified to keep them. It feels like I've trapped a piece of it in this little glass and metal box, and sometimes late at night, in the quiet of this motel room, I think I can hear it, a faint, faint static coming from the phone's speaker.